the James City County Board of Supervisors to order for the purpose of a business meeting. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower? Here. Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
Ms. Sadler?
Here.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Here.
All present.
We have what looks like a very long agenda today in front of us, but a lot of that will be handled, I think, fairly expeditiously. But we're very pleased to have two presentations to begin our meeting today. The first is from Jamestown Rediscovery, and I'm pleased to recognize and introduce Dr. James Horn, who's the president and CEO of Jamestown Rediscovery, to introduce his team and a presentation today on Jamestown. Dr. Horn.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us to give this presentation this afternoon. My name is Jim Horn, as John mentioned, and I'd like to introduce my colleagues. I have here in the light jacket Mr. Michael Lavin, who's Director of Collections and Conservation, and behind him is Mr. Dave Givens, who's Director of Archaeology. And actually, I'm joined by another colleague, Denise Kellogg, who is Director of Development. So, but I'm thinking that Denise won't have too much to say during this meeting. I've got a slide up just to remind people who we are, where we are. I know you probably all know this, but we found over the years it doesn't do any harm to underline that we are the island. We are the original site. We are Jamestown Rediscovery, and that is part of Preservation Virginia. We are not Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and we are not the Park Service. So just to clarify, we're here this afternoon. I'm conscious of the time. I've told my colleagues to speak like tobacco auctioneers to get through this presentation, but you will know of the challenges that face us, and they are urgent and imminent challenges. We're here looking really for your advice and support generally as we go forward with presentations at the state level and congressional level, because this is, you're going to hear, this is a big project, and we want to give you as much information as we can this afternoon. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dave Givens, and he will start the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you guys for hearing us out today and seeing our presentation. It's nice to see some very familiar faces in front of me. I am a proud member of citizen of James City County and of Jolly Pond Road specifically, and have been here in the county since 1993 as an archaeologist. Now, the history of Jamestown is quite deep. It's, our nation's history is rooted in this community very deeply, in that the organization that I work for was the Association for Preservation of Virginia, formerly that APVA, now known as Preservation Virginia, which was formed in 1889. And in 1893, they came out to Jamestown Island as human remains were reported eroding out of the Confederate earthworks there, Fort Pocahontas. And in a series of actions, they acquired those 22 acres that we still have today and began efforts at preservation. Now, preservation isn't just stopping erosion and things like that. It's also preservation in the American mindset, right? And knowing the beginnings of our nation and knowing that's here in James City County. Now, archaeology began immediately in 1897. It was directed by a woman archaeologist, Mary Jeffrey Galt, and she said, "With my own hands, I dug the first representative governmental body in English North America." And we know through our excavations and re-exploring that in 1619 to be true. Now, one of the first efforts, and we carry on this tradition certainly at Jamestown, was preserving the land from washing away by the James River. We have a long 7-mile fetch there, and the wind-borne erosion, if you think of the island as a ship going into the wind, one of the first attempts by the Corps of Engineers was the seawall. It was put in, started construction in 1901, completed by 1904, and it still stands today. And Michael Lavin will talk to you a little bit more about our efforts to continue that preservation. But that stopped the erosion, and the history of archaeology continued for now nearly a century. Our project in the Jamestown Rediscovery Foundation project started in 1994 with Dr. William M. Kelso, our first director of archaeology, and he set the groundwork for education. And archaeology is not only a tourist destination here, it's certainly education. And it's about our shared past and what we know about the beginnings of our nation. And it's always been, as you see here in the pictures, the rope very close by. Now, water has always played a role in the construction of James Fort and the English colonization. The arrival of the Virginia Indian community, native community, 13,000 years ago within James City County, and then certainly the boats that forcibly brought the first Africans in 1619 to Jamestown. But it's that shared history and the irony of that water that threatens us today as the excavations continue. Now, this shared history is something that we all can unite around, certainly in Tidewater, Virginia, and it's Jamestown is its place and its role of the arrival of these cultures and how they hammered things out and how we became American is the universal story that we all surrounds us all in the United States. And that all starts here in our county, in our backyard, 15 minutes from this very building. Now, that story isn't just about pottery and bricks and things like that. It's actually a very elegant story of, as you see here, preserved corn cobs, 2 different corn types that the Virginia Indians grew, squash, bone tools, shell beads made by Virginia Indians. And that might shock you. Why would that be at this English fort? And that's the kind of elegance that we're talking about out at the site. Now, after 28 years and building, we continue to excavate. The story continues. And again, it's not only about just what we're finding, it's what we're finding out about ourselves as Americans. And that's an exceptionally broad reach, international reach. We argue about this out at site. Hardly anybody around the world would not know about Jamestown. Again, a James City county. Our county is named after this very location that we're talking about today. But we have had 3 of the top 10 finds in archaeology as attributed to Archaeology Magazine, right? Now, we are, as a tourist destination, we're a very small nonprofit, but very high on the list of what to visit when you come to James City County, and that's not to be lost, right? There's Colonial Williamsburg, which is our large partner, and we're number 2 on the attractions for TripAdvisor, which is absolutely phenomenal. But we are fighting a tough battle with sea level rise. This is a photo recently in which we were looking for 1607, the outwork of the eastern bulwark, and every day it would flood, and we had to pump it off, and eventually we stopped because we knew that this was a broader planning issue for us as archaeologists, and that we need to come back in the future. Not lost, but just different for us. We have to fight that, and that's that urgency that Jim is referring to. Now, where we are in our lives as archaeologists and as a team is preservation and looking towards the future with heads up, eyes up in a positive way. We don't bury our head in the mud, as it were. So we have begun planning for the future. That includes technology. It's the right team at the right time. We implement a lot of non-invasive evaluation of our property through ground penetrating radar. This is an image recently of the field out near our pitch and tar swamp, which was identified, labeled on a map in 1607. And you can see there's the Great Road that went to Williamsburg is in this. There's lot lines, and there's original 1607 features amongst all of this, including the redacted part at the top is water. And so as we go through, and some of the things Michael's talking about, again, it's my opinion, it's the right team at the right time. We have and always will be about action, and we call for your support as we move forward into the future. Thank you. Mouse is very sensitive.
Thank you for inviting us, and I have to say, I am a lifelong resident of James City County. My dad was with the college, came here in 1968, and I was born at Williamsburg Community Hospital that doesn't exist anymore. Been quite the ride here. I love James City County. So, as Dave was alluding to, that we are up against a battle against sea level rise, and we applied for and were nominated as one of America's 11 most endangered sites, most at risk for 2022. Now, that's something that we wouldn't want necessarily to be nominated for, but we are using it as a vehicle for awareness to the situation that Jamestown is dealing with. And these are all just things that are attacking the island right now. Sea level rise, extreme storm events, land subsidence, increased inundation, rising saltwater aquifer, and an aging infrastructure system that are all contributing to these issues that we have on the island. This is Hurricane, by the time it reached us, it wasn't a hurricane, but Hurricane Irene in 2011. And the flooding that you see associated with this storm is what we are seeing now on normal situation out on the island, where about 14 acres of our 22.5 acres are underwater. This storm did cause some damage on the seawall that we have to get repaired, and that happened often, but we are addressing that right now with a couple $1 million of grant funding. Something else that these are all water elevation storm events that are +4 to NAVD 88 datum, showing between 1933 and 2000 there were 12 of those events, and between 2000 and 2016 there were 12 events. So we are seeing this phenomenon again and again and quite often. And what does that do to the property? So this is a non-rainy day. There's a low pressure system off the coast of Virginia. This is May 10th, 2022, where we have to shut down. The pathways are inundated underwater. The site is not accessible, and we are up against something that it's beyond what a small nonprofit can correct on its own. And again, we're starting to gather the data. We're working with VHB, an engineering firm. One of their branches is here in Williamsburg in McLaws Circle, to gather the data necessary in order to address these issues. And they're showing us, since the datum was put in at the Jamestown side of the Jamestown, Scotland ferry, we are getting these flood events 5 to 6 times a year. So this is not us just going out and taking pictures or taking the drone out there. We can point to that we are seeing this quite often. And this is what the norm will be, where our Smith Field in between the fort and the State House Ridge is flooding quite often. And then there are lots of tools that we can use in our toolkit, and one of them is James City County's property tool. So this is from your all's GIS map that shows 7.5 acres of our property are now designated as wetlands, which were not wetlands before. And that's caused by this inundation from pitch and tar swamp from the east and spreading onto our property, which is on the western end of the island. And we know that not to be the case over time. This is a 1781 map showing the eastern end of the island with no swamp encroachment. 1877 Coastal Survey, same. It wasn't until 1907 and Samuel Young, the engineer that engineered and built the seawall, documents the branch of pitch and tar swamp coming over onto the western end of the island. We also have photographic evidence from the 1920s and 30s showing that our property was relatively dry. So this is a new phenomenon that we are getting into. And then Sewell's Point has been accurately measuring the level of the sea level since 1929. And it has shown 0.45 meters or 1.6 feet of sea level rise in the past 93 years. And the projections are also not good. Even if we follow the intermediate projection level, it shows by 2075 or 2080, what you saw with that image with Jamie standing in front of Smith Field will be a normal condition for Jamestown Island. And here's that graphically, the green line. So we are, as Dave said, drawing a line in the, I guess, the mud to address this and hit it head on. We're not complaining about the situation that we're in. We know that we need to act, and that's what we're hoping to do. We are conducting our own analysis. We did a ground penetrating radar on the seawall, and we have started this $2 million project to augment the seawall. And if I ever need an excavator operator, I'm getting this guy. He is absolutely amazing. So we're adding 96,000 tons of granite armor stone to our seawall for a total width of 25 feet over the 1,700 linear feet of seawall. And we're using Coastal Design and Construction, Jim Gunn, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with Jim, in order to do this project. And it is an engineered plan that I did the joint permit application right here in this building about 6 months ago. And this project will be done in a couple of weeks. They're putting the finishing touches on the seawall right now. And I could watch this time lapse all day, but we don't have that much time.
Intriguing.
And this is towards the northern portion of our, northwestern portion of our property. And we are completing that project now. But that has led us into these areas that were flooded during these most recent flood events just in May 10th. And it is influencing archaeology. Now that we know the situation and what is going on, we cannot ignore what is happening to the property, and we need to intervene. So this is just a schematic of the island and what is there, and our strategies or approaches for what needs to happen. And we've started that process with the repair of the seawall, but we need to elevate buildings, roadways, pathways, install berms, improve infrastructure. And all of these processes are not inexpensive. And we know that there are success stories in the area, such as the Ohio Creek Chesterfield Heights project, about a 100-acre neighborhood in Norfolk along the Ohio Creek, and they received, the city of Norfolk wrote a HUD grant and received $112 million to address this issue, and they have a resiliency office. And this is Kyle Spencer, the acting, who gave us a tour, Chief Resiliency Officer. This is the berm over at Ohio Creek. So the future of Jamestown is bright. As Dave mentioned, we have the right team at the right time and the right tools in order to address these issues, but it is going to take funds. These are our initial estimates of what it will cost in order to intervene and do all of the appropriate intervention at Jamestown. And we've been saying all along it's going to be in the tens of millions, but we're pretty confident it's going to be just north of 30 million. But we don't know until we get into the full permitting process and have all of these things vetted. And especially if we're using federal funds, if we're going to be required to do an EA or a EIS. And then this is VHB's associated fees with those tasks.
Can you go back one slide?
And we can share this with Scott as a PDF, and then you guys can view it at any time.
So I intend to use it to emphasize again what we're here for today. It is a call to action. It's the beginning of our campaign to save Jamestown. We know it's a long road ahead because this is a lot of money. And for that, of course, we've got to go to these multiple agencies at state and congressional level. But it starts, all politics is local, as we know, and it starts here with you all to give you as much information about what's happening at Jamestown, one of the most important cultural and historical sites in the country, where, in a sense, our nation began. So we are committed to saving Jamestown, and you can help us with support, writing letters on our behalf to other agencies, and also with your advice, because there's going to be a lot of advice needed to get through all the various elements of the mitigation processes that we're going to adopt. So it's got to happen. We're aiming to get this all underway within the next 5 years. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Horn and Mr. Gibbons and Mr. Lavin. Ms. Kellogg, nice to see you. I was surprised to hear that you weren't going to say anything, because we're used to having a very gentle and professional request for financial support that I think we want to emphasize to all of our citizens today, that this is a real jewel for our community. We have not only a site that has the designation that you don't imagine that folks would like to have, which is as one of the most endangered sites of historical importance in the nation, and yet it provides that call to action. It underscores the need for you all to take the steps that you have taken. We're fortunate to have a homegrown director of collections who is able to continue to find new artifacts that help us better understand our history. One of the most distinguished historians of colonial America, serving as the president and CEO. So obviously, your organization is of vital importance to us as a community, to the nation, and to the world. So very much appreciate the fact that you're here, and I am confident that we will provide as much support as we can in helping to achieve the objectives you've laid out today. But let me ask board members if they have comments.
I just have
Eisenhower?
one question, and in looking and talking about repairing the seawall, and then of course most of it is in like elevation of buildings, a comprehensive resiliency project. But you mentioned install flood berms. It appears from your pictures that the flooding comes from the creek, the swamp. It's not coming over the seawall type of thing. Is part of this plan to essentially berm that, to try to create like the dikes in Holland to protect that land from so you keep that water out, or is that built into this as part of your plan?
You know, if you wouldn't mind standing to the microphone so that our vast viewing audience at home can hear.
The current plan is to protect Jamestown for the next 50 to 75 years. The seawall has a base elevation between 6.2 and 6.5 feet, which would protect us for the next 50 to 75 years. But I also feel it would give us enough time to analyze the proper action if we need to go above that. So I think that is, I wouldn't want to go to do a very drastic change to the landscape and elevate everything to a 9-foot elevation, because I do feel like that's a little excessive for today. But I do think we need more data over time and make sure that all the projections are coming true, and be able to plan for the next, during the next 50 years to protect it for the next 50.
But you're talking, if you had a berm back along that would probably keep that area from flooding as much.
It would protect our area from a flood event, which is what we're seeing 5 to 6 times a year. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Even if with the addition of 3.2 feet, which is the projection by 2075, and a 3-foot flood event, we would still be protected.
Okay.
But it would need a significant investment, but we do have a very good concept, but that's all we've paid for to date.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You would, I think it's very important to protect the island and everything we have there, and it all started here. across the United States. I mean, this is where it started. You would think the President of the United States would even get behind this one and say, you know, as much money as he's spending on other items, that this item would be something that would be supported higher up. I mean, not only with us, but higher up through the United States. And maybe hopefully some of the media will pick up on some of this and urge the President and Congress to put money into this in order to fund it to protect this site, because I think this site is valuable to the United States as a whole. Not only is it a gold mine to James City County, but to the entire United States. So hopefully you'll get some more traction too from this, from other media sources, and that they'll pick this up and see the urgency of it and see what we're trying to protect and get further along with Congress and also further along with the President of the United States. I mean,
I
Biden
agree.
should pick this up and move on it today.
Well, I should tell everyone that we are slated to be on CBS Evening News this Thursday for this specific project. It's an outcome of the 11 Most Endangered, which we've received great press. I've done interviews for the Weather Channel. All of us have done major media interviews. But CBS Evening News this Thursday, Eye on America, is going to be Jamestown. So I'm barring some major news.
And take a bucket and say, let's fill this up with money.
But one of the issues that we're having is finding the correct program in order to apply for these federal funds.
Yes.
It's easier if you're a neighborhood, because you can apply for these HUD funds, or the state of Virginia. There's nothing that says protect a historic site nonprofit. So we're having to kind of square peg round hole our ideas. So that's where we need more minds to help us choose the correct appropriations.
And it's out there, it's just finding it.
Right.
It's just finding that right click. Thank you.
So I had a question about and I apologize for not knowing this, is Denise your development office, or does she have more than one person, or what?
We have a very small shop. We have several people doing the fundraising for this, so it's a big amount of money, but I think that we can do it if we work with our federal and state partners and others. And VHB has given us a lot of guidance about different types of grants that we can apply for. It's a very sellable thing here that we're trying to fundraise for, and I think that we'll be successful. It's not going to be easy. Are you asking because you have some staff that you want to lend?
Well, no, I'm asking because I didn't know how big your development office was, and so I was going to ask if you all had thought about going to another organization and saying, hey, can you lend us one of your big gifts personnel to come over here, work, with you, but have their main, because you're not just,
Right.
you've got other money you're trying to raise for the organization. You're not just, this can't just be the only thing you're raising money for.
No.
And so I didn't know if, about, going and saying, hey, you're a big fundraiser. Would you consider coming over here for a year and helping us raise this, $35 million for this very important?
We do need to explore partnerships with other organizations that could be able to help us raise money for this. And we have like an initial list of those that we're trying to think through. But you're right. We can't let the fundraising for this take away from what we need to do every single day at Jamestown to continue general operations, which is already a challenge. So you're right, Ruth.
So thank you. That was and then for me, I would ask that, and I apologize for not thinking of this earlier. Really, we need to put this on our legislative agenda. And certainly we need to talk about getting a letter up to, Congress, our senators. And I know that when we came out for the presentation, Senator Kane did come on. And so, I know he's aware and trying to, get support as well, but we can certainly try to do our part by sending something from our board to emphasize.
Yeah, that would be terrific. We've made contact with, as you know, with Senator Kane, also Senator Warner, not yet with the president,
Next on
yeah,
the list.
yeah, we're going all the way because of the scale of the challenge that to raise this kind of money.
Sure.
We have to look for that vital state and congressional support. What I would like to do is keep you informed about visits. We hope to have the Deputy Secretary of the Environment, I think that's his title, Mr. Voiles here, and also we'll be reaching out to the governor to come and visit and see for himself what's taking place. So we'd like to keep you informed of all of that.
Yeah, I cannot emphasize enough. I know when we came out there, poor John, I must have said fascinating 6,000 times, but it is fascinating. And if you have not been out there, you are missing an opportunity. And I think, there's so many people who are like, oh yeah, some flooding. Oh, to lose the history of our nation would just be just so detrimental, and you can't come back from that. So I would urge anyone local that has not been out there in a while to go and see what the discoveries that you've made. The museum is absolutely fascinating, and just the work that goes on every day, and you all are always willing to talk and tell people what you're finding, and you can learn a lot about our nation. So some things we didn't do well. It's not. We're certainly, what happened in 1619 is not something that we want to be proud of, but it is part of our nation's history. And so talking about that and what the impact was, I think, is so important. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you all for being here. I'm with you. I could have watched that loop of that. My kids would call it the Bob the Builder Digger, but moving those rocks was like hypnotic. It was almost therapeutic. I'm guessing by looking at your chart here that these items are kind of phased in or in stages based on the immediate needs. So are you presenting it that way when you're looking at your fundraising of the initial things that you have to have done now, and then everything else builds on that?
Yes. I would consider the berm and anything associated with that berm, the protection of the property is at the top of the list. But included with that would be we want to make all of our pathways ADA compliant. If we're making our pathways all ADA compliant, then we should be raising the pathways. Do it as
You can't do that unless you've done the other.
Yeah,
Right,
do it
okay.
as you go. Raising buildings, we want to be 3 feet above the FEMA floodplain, so we would want to address those issues as well. So it is almost itemized on the spreadsheet you have in front of you, but it is all part of the same improvement project.
So comprehensively, it all
Yeah.
works together, but you have certain things that
Seawall
are
was first.
out there first, right? Okay.
Yeah, seawall was definitely first. We wanted to make sure that we were not going to have the James River literally cutting the island in half.
Very good.
So that's why we addressed that
That's
first.
great. Thank you very much for being here. It is indeed fascinating. But thank you all.
Okay. Stevens, do you have anything you want to do?
No, I appreciate their time and attention. They've been more than willing to show me around. I think to Ms. Larson's point, they would be willing to do that. And I do think advocacy is certainly a role the county would play going forward in trying to assist them and work through saving the history that's there and more discoveries to be made. I'm told there's an awful lot of the site that preserving it allows more of our history to be discovered and interpreted. And I think that adds a lot of value to it as well.
Well, again, thank you so much for taking the time to present this information to us, and hopefully our citizens are better informed now as a result of this, and those who are like the New Yorkers who haven't been to the Statue of Liberty, more will take advantage of the opportunity to rediscover their history. Thank you very much for being here today. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
Laughs for you.
Which is not to say that the next presentation isn't a stimulating and exciting one, because it is. To tee that up, I'd like to invite Rebecca Vinroot, our Director of Social Services, here.
So from seawalls to social services, we are here to give a presentation about our care team. You will see on the consent calendar there is a section for acceptance of year 5 for the grant that funds this program. We have received a generous grant from the Williamsburg Health Foundation, now going on 5 years, to support this program, which is, I can truly say, a model for Virginia. There is no other program like this in the state of Virginia. So we're very happy that you all allowed us to share information regarding the program. So I'm going to pass it over to Lynette Diaz, who is the care team coordinator, and she will talk about the program and also introduce the other members of her team. So thank you.
Welcome,
Good
Ms. Diaz.
afternoon. Good afternoon, Board, Mr. Stevens. I also wanted to add that this is what we'll present today is an overview of where we've been, and hopefully we can talk about where we're going. Today we have with us the care team nurse, Nicole Davis. She's a registered nurse for the care team. And we also have Miss Courtney Thomas, who's our social worker. And as Ms. Vinroot stated, I'm the coordinator for the program and have been since we started in 2018. We really believe that the Child Health Initiative is at the center of innovation. It's looking at new ways to partner with families for health and well-being outcomes. So a little history about the Child Health Initiative. Back in 2014, the foundation brought together a group of community stakeholders to discuss concerns there were regarding the health outcomes related to children who were not meeting educational and developmental goals, particularly looking at children who were aging out of preschool and going into kindergarten. From that, a support model was created called the Care Team. In 2015, the City of Williamsburg Human Services was awarded funding for a care team. In 2017, we started a pilot program that then awarded us funding in 2018. So we're very happy to state that we're going on year 5. The primary community partners for the initiative include, of course, both our social services and human services groups, but we also want to make sure that we are partnered with Child Development Resources and also WJCC Public Schools. This slide doesn't show the many, many other secondary partners we have. We work closely with our own James City County Parks and Recreation Office. We work with the School Health Initiative Program. We work with the Williamsburg Regional Library System, Literacy for Life, and many, many other nonprofit organizations, faith-based organizations, and of course, health systems in the greater Williamsburg area. The mission really is to promote health and well-being for all people in our community. Our model really looks at families who are under-resourced and who really are working on facing multiple and very complex stressors on a day-to-day basis. Ultimately, the goal is to create a community that's healthy. That's the collective impact that we hope to achieve with this model. Other points of value of the program for the community is that it creates a continuum of care between community residents and community providers. And it also allows us to identify system barriers. And in that identification, we can work to solve or improve or even remove those barriers for families who we partner with. Our target population, as I mentioned, is really looking at families who have children who are in 5th grade or younger. So we're looking at early childhood development as a core principle of the model, particularly looking at children who are in publicly funded preschool moving into the public school system. We are working with families who have lifestyle habits that increase health risks. So that could be poor nutrition, lack of physical activity, or maybe some inadequate sleep routines. We also support families with coordinating services related to all of those systems we were talking about: healthcare, education, employment, and just generally maintaining their basic needs. We have noticed that families with no to low risk factors related to child welfare and safety tend to do better, or actually are more benefited from the program. One of the things that is interesting to note, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with the United Way's work with ALICE, the ALICE population, which is identified as asset limited, income constrained, but employed. The research that United Way has done has identified that we have this population in James City County that they're on the brink of poverty. And they've identified that about 33% of the county is made up of these households. That translates to about 29,000 households in James City County. We are really looking at families mostly who are single parents. They often have limited options and have to make very difficult decisions on a day-to-day basis. So we are really understanding that families are living particularly in a system that makes it difficult to stay healthy. And that means there are barriers related to unstable housing that maybe is unsafe, complex transportation needs, a lack of adult dental care, particularly in our area for those who receive Medicaid, and a lack of mental health resources or access to them. When we created the model, we really, for the James City County team, we really wanted to look at what the Health Foundation had already created when discussing all of the things that go into our health. And so we know traditionally that what goes into our health is healthy behaviors, our access to good health care, but we also want to understand all of the elements that are health-related social needs. And so what we've done is we have both case managers sort of work this wheel that you see here. Our nurse works on healthy living goals, and our social worker works on social and economic mobility goals. We also rely on the Aspen Institute's work on the two-generation approach, or 2-gen as it's commonly referred to. And this approach is a little bit different, but it's very innovative. It's the idea that we are going to work with families to build family well-being by intentionally and simultaneously working with not just the children, but also the parents and caregivers at the same time. And that really is, I think, something that is innovative about this program, because traditionally models have just focused on one member of the family and their needs. And with the care team using the 2-gen approach, we are really looking at integrating the science behind early childhood with the science of parenting. What's also, I think, unique about our partnership model is just that word, that it's a partnership. Oftentimes, traditional service delivery models have been a bit top-down. So you have, a system head or a case manager who's kind of coming into a home and giving advice and then backs out. But with our model, we are really looking at putting the family front and center. We see the family as partners, as equals, and all of the goals for that particular family are based on their own individual circumstances and abilities. We also have the unique piece of having a nurse on our team. So that is very different. That's a new way of looking at how we approach family health and well-being. And so, as I said before, our nurse really works on medical care coordination and educating on healthy living habits, while our social worker works on things that are related to socioeconomic health and mobility, as well as with children in the school system and helping them achieve their goals through that. And then I, as the coordinator, kind of take the bird's eye view of it all. So I look at the whole family system, and I help and support the case managers to work with the family to integrate all these goals into one. As you can see, we work on a lot of different things. There's a lot to this. This isn't just about meeting basic needs. It's important to understand that this model is about navigating systems. So if you kind of look at the family as its own little ecosystem, you can then think about it in terms of the ecosystem of the community. And what we work on is helping families really navigate all of these ecosystems. We help families understand the community resources and partners in the community, but we also work with community partners to understand the families. And I think that's a really important piece of what we do that's innovative. We help community services work better together. And as far as outcomes go, in 2020, so I think that would be year 3 of our funding, we were able to work with the Child Health Initiative partners to develop a measurement tool of core indicators. We have 24 core indicators, 12 for the children and 12 for the caregivers. And we use this to measure progress in family goals. And what we've observed since we've been tracking that information is that we have seen families really make healthier choices for their family. Great example is a mother who decided to quit smoking. And that created a positive domino effect to every element of the household. Her quitting smoking saved her money. It allowed that time and money to be spent on more productive things with her child. She was feeling better about herself. Her mental health improved. She also started cooking more at home instead of spending money on fast food. And so these are the types of things that are all interrelated, and we have seen that outcome with many families. We also have seen an increase in caregivers' abilities to coordinate their child's medical and health care. So that's an ongoing thing. So it's not just going to well child visits, but it's also dental care, vision care, and any ongoing behavioral health support that's needed for the child. And interestingly, too, we also have seen that there's better school attendance in the children because parents are more effectively communicating with school officials. And that, again, is about navigating systems and understanding how processes work. We can't say that everyone reaches economic stability in the program, but we can say that families, particularly caregivers, are really learning about how to manage their finances a little better. We work on them with budgeting and understanding credit and navigating the housing systems. And we also see that families are making meaningful decisions about the support systems they have in their lives. So really making sure that the children are in safe and positive living environments. To conclude the presentation, I just wanted to also talk about, give you a little bit of a snapshot of an initiative that we launched at the Department of Social Services called the Bridges Out of Poverty Initiative. So in 2018, I became certified as a trainer of the framework. The framework is developed by Ruby Payne and Philip Duvall, and really the mission of the framework is to allow communities and professionals to wrap their head around the ideas of the mental models of economic class. And so since I became a trainer, all DSS staff have the introduction training usually within 6 months of them being hired. And that's really to foster understanding about the work that we do at social services. From that, we created a Bridge Builders work group. So we meet, and it's a committee of staff who meets every other month. And we really look at our own internal culture at social services and how it impacts service delivery. And we use this framework to have those discussions. And then we're very excited about our newest pilot program we launched in March of this year. It's called the Getting Ahead in a Just Getting By World. That is also based on the work by Mr. Philip Duvall. And Ms. Courtney Thomas is our Getting Ahead facilitator. She is trained to navigate these conversations. And the idea is that we bring community residents to the table and we do a co-investigation with our staff to really look at what's going on in terms of poverty and economic stress and resource navigation within James City County. And so it's really at the core of our model here to make sure that we have family voices at the center of these conversations. We know that the continuum of causes of poverty range from the individual circumstances and decisions all the way up to the systemic policies. And so what we do with this program and the care team is, instead of just choosing what side of that continuum we look at it all at once. And so we're hopeful that these continuing conversations with community members give us insight so that we can all be healthier and more effective in our work. So thank you very much. I can take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Diaz. Anybody have questions?
Thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I wondered about, you talked about the mom that stopped smoking. Where are you keeping, I mean, are you keeping any data to show some of the outcomes that you hope to see? Like, is the family getting more sleep, or, you know, how are you tracking something like that?
So when they're an active care team family, we're using those 24 indicators. So we rate the family every 6 months. On average, families stay within the program for about 2 years. And then we also have developed a way to survey the families after they've exited the program. Right now, I will say we have a small sample size on that because we did just start tracking in 2020. And also we have families who have maybe moved out of the area. We can't connect with them. We don't know exactly what's going on. But for families who are here, we are actually in contact with quite a bit of them. And through that survey, we learn kind of where they are in maintaining their goals.
Thank you.
Can I just ask for clarification? Did I hear you say 29,000 families?
According to the United Way, 33% of James City County households are identified as ALICE households. So those are families who are living on the brink of poverty. And that turns out to be about 29,000 households.
That sounds high to me, because that would be about 90,000 people if we were talking about it being a third of the population. Is it maybe the number of people as opposed to households?
It could be. The UnitedForAlice.org website has their research data center on this, and that's how they have written it, the 33%, 29,000 households.
I'll try to take a look at that.
We can double check that for sure.
And how many, would you say, at a given time are in the program? How many families?
So our goal is always to serve 25 families a fiscal year, but that's on a rolling basis. So because the families usually stay about 2 years, we typically maintain a caseload of about 10 to 15 families at a time, but we have gone up to 20 at a time. With 3 people, that seems like it should be, doable, but sometimes because we're looking at so many elements involved with the family's life, that is actually a high caseload.
Sure, I would imagine that there are all sorts of problems in terms of maintaining a stable pool of participants. People who have to move because of inability to pay rent or things of that nature.
Sometimes we have crossover between jurisdictions, so sometimes families will move to the city or city families will move to the county, but the nice thing is that both jurisdictions have a care team, so we try to work collaboratively on that. Really what might be a barrier to maintaining participation in the program is really mental health. Sometimes we work with families who are at a level with challenges with mental health that are above us. We are not clinicians, and so we really have to kind of take a step back and think about, well, what resources can clinicians provide for those families first, have them stabilized, and then they are more effective in progressing in the care team model.
Thank you very much. Obviously, it's important work to try to provide resources to help people get on their feet, understand the kind of consequences of decisions that they make. And I think a real challenge is to try to develop that pool of information that Ms. Larson was talking about a moment ago, because if you can demonstrate that it's having even a small but significant impact, it might well be a reason to think about additional expansion.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today.
Take care.
Okay. We have a consent calendar for consideration that consists of 9 items, and I will just mention that they include acceptance of funds from the Virginia Forfeited Assets Sharing Program. We have the adoption of a revised policy for remote participation in meetings by board members, grant award of $275,000 for Child Health Initiative, Hampton Roads Hazard Mitigation Plan adoption, Master Services Agreement for Internet Services Provider, Master Services Agreement for Telecommunications Services, Cox Communications, 3 sets of minutes from previous meetings, resolution of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance violation at 130 Lakeside Circle and 1581 Jamestown Road, and a small municipal and county government enterprise agreement. Anybody like to pull any of those items for discussion?
I was just curious about the internet service provider.
So why don't we pull
All right.
item number
I think it's 5.
number 5, okay? And if that's the only item to be pulled, does anybody have a motion to adopt the consent calendar?
Motion to adopt the balance of the consent calendar.
We have a motion to adopt. Mr. Stevens, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I was just more curious about the fact that there were 2, who's coming?
Ms. Fox?
Yes,
Elisa?
I was just curious because there's 2, so, which I didn't realize was a option.
This is 2 for redundancy, and it's mostly for our networking.
Okay,
So like if Cox goes down, we have a backup of SEGRA. We have them throughout the county.
okay,
That's what that's implying.
okay, all right. I was like, is there a new option? Okay,
This is just for us networking and getting to the internet.
okay, thank
And
you.
since you're standing there, I'm going to shine a spotlight on you for a minute, Ms. Fox, because I noticed that you had 2 items on the agenda, and one involved a new agreement on telecommunications and the other on the internet, and resulted in a combined savings of about $20,000.
Yes.
Yeah, good job.
You
Good
knew it.
job.
That was CJ Joyner, one of my coworkers, went out and got those deals. So definitely,
Yeah.
he deserves applause.
Well, we'll pat CJ on the back as well, because he always does a great job. And I would tell you that a lot of county residents will probably be banging on your door to figure out how they can use their telecommunication and
It's
internet
probably
service
just due
provider.
to new technologies, because those were 5-year contracts and things have changed since then. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks
With
very
that,
much.
I'll move number 5.
Okay, we have a motion to approve item number 5. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Ms. Sadler.
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Aye.
Mr. Hippel.
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, we'll now move on to board discussion, and the item for consideration today is the RecConnect program. Mr. Carnifex.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the RecConnect program. For those that aren't familiar, that's our before and after school program, and then our full-day summer camp program. Received a letter from the YMCA about a month ago requesting interest in taking over that program for the county. And I've also had conversations with WISC, who's also runs a licensed before and after school care program. So we have a nonprofit agency and then a private agency here in the county that have expressed interest in that program. To give you a little history, we used to run the soccer programs and we turned them over to our 2 local nonprofits. So I know that we got to balance a quality program, but also the government services. And if we've got 2 agencies out there that run licensed daycare and summer camp programs, we would need to issue an RFP to solicit to see if there's others that are interested. I only know of one other organization. The York County School System has a private provider that's running their after-school program. So there potentially could be at least 3 agencies that would be interested in that. So before I would issue an RFP, I wanted to make sure that was something that the board, doesn't mean we're going to do it. It just means we're going to put the information out there to see who's interested. From my perspective, 3 things kind of stand out. It needs to be a licensed quality program, similar to what we're doing. How are they going to handle the financial assistance that we provide? We write off between 80 and 110,000 a year in scholarships on an annual basis. And so most of those, at least the 2 organizations that have talked to me about it, they would offer something similar. YMCA has a sliding scale. And then third, we have 11 employees that are full-time employees that are in those programs, and what would we do and what would they do with them? Would they offer them positions? And if so, some of them are long-tenured county employees that I would want to make sure that we would retain them to work in parks or in rec services in some other areas. So it involves a lot of people, and first priority is to make sure if we do issue a contract with somebody else, we have to work with the school system. I've talked to the school system, and they would want us to manage the contract. So we would have to manage the contract. And if you don't know, the Boys and Girls Clubs will be in James River this coming year. So they're going to be running the program out there, and we are not going to be running the before and after school program at James River. So that's one element that's kind of new. As you know, we were having staffing challenges, just like everybody, the last 18 to 24 months. We finally got our full-time staffing up in this program and throughout the department. We still have almost 23 part-time vacancies. About half of those are in this program, the summer camp program now. So we're still having our challenges, but we are prepared to continue operating it as we have in the past. But I feel like we should issue the RFP and put a team of county employees together, possibly some folks from social services, our department, and others, to at least see what's out there. And then we would make a decision after that. Yes, sir.
I guess my question would be the thought process that staff has gone through to get to the point where you're coming to us to ask to do this, because obviously you're going to look at who all's out there and what they could offer and what the benefits are. But there had to be some sort of, if you will, is it just the staffing issues we've been having, or is it the cost? I mean, doing this through a private or a nonprofit, initially, what are your thoughts about advantages versus disadvantages? Is it going to be less cost for us? Is it going to be more productive for the kids? I mean, these are the questions I sort of have in just general background.
Sure. So we recover, even through COVID, we were recovering our direct operating costs. So that means each site that has one full-time person and the part-time staff, we were covering their salaries, benefits, and all operating costs, and we've done that for the entirety of the program. We have 2 program coordinator level, because you're talking about 9 different sites. So we have 2 program coordinators, and we prior to COVID, we were recovering their salaries and benefits as part of the revenue that come in, even after writing off the $80,000 to $100,000. So the program's direct costs have been, for the most part, self-supporting. The revenue we bring in and what we write off. It doesn't count for the indirect costs. So your next level supervisor, the time that our HR department and hiring, our FMS department, when you're talking about an $1,000 budget for the year of turning over that, you're talking about a lot of indirect costs that we haven't really put a number on, but it's been covering its direct costs, but not the indirect costs.
And this is what you'd be looking at with the RFP. You would be looking at that analysis to see.
We would see what the cost savings would be, both direct and indirect, if any. And for me, it's about, are they going to be able to provide the same quality licensed program
I think
at a comparable price and not impact the families that are on our financial assistance program now. So that'll be a challenge.
That was my biggest concern,
Yeah.
is, you know, this is a tremendous program for a lot of the residents of the county. And I want to make sure that whatever we do, we protect that interest, because, you know, for those families and those children, it's, I think, very, very important. But, yeah, I have no problem with looking at it. Is this, you're just asking us for the go-ahead to put out the RFPs and do the analysis, and then you come back and tell us what you found?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Eisenhower, your question, at least part of it, was why bring it now? What's changed different? Because the YMCA's been here, WISC has been around, they've both done some version of child care. And Mr. Carnifax can add too, but what I remember this spring is we were talking and having trouble staffing our needs. WISC and the Y were able to change their salary structure quicker than us. And some of that is, when I look at what's in the comparable salary grade with our child care staff, then I start elevating them above some others that maybe then I've got, it's just a bigger cascading for the county. And so we were having some challenges with staffing. And again, you took action that has really made it better. And I think for the next year, we feel okay going in, although we still have some vacancies within our part-time staff and full-time as well. But it was, is it time to talk about a different path and still providing that service to our community, because it's still pretty important for those families. We've heard that consistently. As Mr. Carnifax mentioned, the school system still believes we should manage that. And I think with your blessing, we're willing to do that, to carry it forward. And at the end of it, the RFP may not make a change. So for the fall of 22 and that school year, it's still going to be us. What we're talking about would be a year away. So we have some time to work through. Is there an interested group? Are they licensed? Can it be fairly seamless to the families that rely on that service? Because that would be a pretty important part of all those things that he laid out. We want that to be a seamless transition for the families that need the service.
And we're working with Boys and Girls Club at James River, because we're running the summer program, and so we're assisting in that transition. And yes, it wouldn't take place at the earliest until the following school year, not this coming August, if we were to do that, because they're going to have to hire staff, and it's going to take time.
How many schools have the RecConnect program right now?
All elementary schools do.
Would that be an expectation as well?
Yes, and the summer camps, because the same staff run our full-day program, so, yeah.
Because I certainly wouldn't want to see any kind of reduction in the availability, the ability of people to bring their kids to the schools that they attend, and
Located in the school system, just like ours, with the exception of James River, so we would drop, you know, that would continue as the Boys and Girls Club.
One of the concerns that I would have about this is simply that, you know, we know the challenge we've had with staffing, and as Mr. Stevens points out, you know, we couldn't act as quickly as the nonprofit. But it's also the case that if those staffing challenges rise up again, there may be more likelihood of, you know, a nonprofit simply saying we can't staff this anymore. So we're going to have to cut back on the number of locations or something of that nature that you know, we would have sort of I think a better ability to control. I guess I'm wondering why we would want to.
But we've already done that, haven't we? Cut back somewhere because we couldn't do it either?
Last year, DJ Montague, we had WISC transport the kids. They picked them up and transport them back because we didn't have the staff last school year. And so that's the one location that we didn't operate an before and after school program last year. We're operating in it now, but yes. You know, this came up back prior to and during the recession. There was some discussion about this, and we had some you know, about this opportunity because the company that was running the York County system approached us at that time, but we chose not to issue the RFP and work through that session time. You know, and the other thing is, you know, we're going to build a new park. Our parks are going to expand over the next 10, 20 years, and, you know, we're going to be needing staff in there, and parks generally don't. So we'll be needing staff to operate them and other services. So I just think it's something we should look at. By no means am I advocating that we get rid of the program. I just feel like we've been contacted and to do our due diligence to say to a nonprofit or a private sector that we're not interested in even entertaining it, you know, the service. without doing a good review. I feel like we should at least put it out there and see what they offer.
So I guess my question is, why are we letting, with all due respect, and I appreciate that, I know that Rebecca is like right in my eye, and I know how she feels about RecConnect. And I do appreciate everything that we've done up until this point. To me, this seems, if we're gonna go ahead, which I have no issue with moving ahead, why are we letting the school system not manage this program? This to me seems, in working in conjunction with them for the summer camps, understanding that, that's probably a little bit more where, you would want to work to make sure that the summer camps are taken care of. I don't know, I mean, however many years ago when I was on the school board and going to the National School Board Conference, there's 15, 20 booths about after-school care, and they called it enrichment at the time. So I don't understand why we're giving them a complete pass that they want us to manage a program that takes place in their schools for their students. So help me with that, especially if we're gonna, if we were gonna continue, and I understand you're not saying we're not going to, because you want to wait and see what comes out of this RFP first. And you may at that time say, you know what, we're just gonna keep everything going as we are now. But if we were to say, okay, we've had these 3 proposals, what is the benefit for Parks and Rec to continue to have to oversee that versus the school system?
Well, I've only had limited discussion with one of the assistant superintendents at the school, so unless Mr. Stevens talked to the superintendent, then that's kind of where I'm getting this from. Their preference would be that we manage this program. They're not opposed to it, somebody else running it in their school, but they would prefer for us to manage it. And
Did they say why?
no, not really, other than I can assume that it's just workload. There is work in managing a contract with, 400 or 500 kids in a program.
Oh, I know
and
there's work. I know that there's work that you've done, and
Yeah.
I get it. But I guess to your point where you are an extremely busy Parks and Recreation Department. I mean, we got a lot going on around here. And so, I guess I would just appreciate a little it doesn't have to happen today. I just would like a little further information about if we decide that this is not a road we're gonna continue to go down, and Mr. Carnifax works with an RFP situation, I think they ought to take more ownership of that than us having to have the responsibility of that. And again, I like sort of the idea of doing something together when it comes to the sort of like what you're doing with the Boys and Girls Club. But I guess just more, I'd like to know why. I mean, we have a lot of workload too. So it doesn't seem fair to say, well, John's got less workload than we do. Well, that's not true.
Well, if we were to issue a contract, then my plan would be to retain our operation manager who oversees the entire program now and the summer program, to keep her in
coordination?
keep her in that position, which, we have the position, and the schools may or may not have that position available. So that's why I think at least the transition, if we were to do that, then we're set up better to manage the contract because we have a staff person who's been managing all of those programs, both the summer program, the before and after school program, and several other small programs. So that would be, my thought on that. Doesn't mean it wouldn't transition over to the school system at some point, but,
And Ms.
Or
Larson,
even
I
if
would-
she would become an employee of the school system.
That's right. John and I had talked some about what that might look like, and we didn't want to drop the program, right, in terms, because we control it today in terms of us staffing it and running it. If you as a board didn't want us to pursue an outside entity and go through this RFP process, then we wouldn't have to push on that anymore. We'd continue to operate it as we do today. If the willingness is to go forward and see, do we get good proposals, then we would do that. And some of those conversations we would have of how do we manage it. And maybe to your point, we transition it, right? We've been doing it. We know it a little better. probably easier for us to go through the RFP and have somebody overseeing it. And once it runs a year and that's under control and set up, then we move a position over there and that person would retain most of the benefits they have with us as well. So I think to your point, it ought to be a school system program someday, but maybe in the transition, we'd get it there for them and then try to hand it off.
And just speaking for myself, are you taking a straw poll for an RFP? What are we exactly are we doing?
If you said no as a group, we don't want you to do it, then we wouldn't. If you say, hey, we're open to the idea of just listening and seeing what comes back, which is at least what I've sensed
I'm
thus
always
far.
open to John's ideas to listening.
And,
Let's do it.
okay.
Yep.
I do think one of the things that we need to keep in mind is that there is an educational component to this, but it's not primarily an educational program. It is also an employment-related issue.
For our employees, you mean?
No, I mean for our workforce in the county who have to find quality daycare before and after school.
So you mean in comparing what
in
somebody
asking-
else knew was going to bring?
In assuming that the schools would be the logical people to run this. I mean, I think there are oftentimes enrichment programs or opportunities to work with kids who are not keeping up with grade level and so forth.
No, that's
I don't
separate
see this
from-
as predominantly an
No.
educational kind of thing.
No, but I do think that it can be an extension of the school day, and I think that that's up to whoever runs it. So, but
We'll see what happens with the proposals. And now, we have no board considerations. We do have board requests and directives. Anybody like to start us off with that? Mr. Eisenhower?
I'm good.
I'm okay.
Okay, well, then we'll just pass right through that and turn right to the reports of the county administrator.
I think I'll pass as well.
Oh, boy. That means that we have closed session, so I'll need a motion to enter into closed session for the.
So moved?
For
considerations- oh, I'm sorry.
matter, the appointment of individuals to county boards and/or commissions pursuant to section 2.23711A1 of the Code of Virginia, specifically appointments to the Clean County Commission, appointments to the Colonial Behavioral Health Board, appointments to the Colonial Community Criminal Justice Board, appointment to the Economic Development Authority, appointment to the Historical Commission, appointment to Thomas Nelson Community College Board, and appointment to Williamsburg Regional Library Board of Trustees.
So moved.
So we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye. Okay. session and look for
I
a
would
motion to
certify that we only talked about those things that we said that we would.
Thank you, Ms. Larson. Mr. Stevens, call the roll, please.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye. Now we have some appointments to make.
Okay, I will make the motion for the appointment of, for the Clean County Commission, Mr. Charles Lauderman and Ms. Peg Borman, as well as David Patterson and Bruce Schock, I guess it is, for terms that expire on July 31st, 2025. Then we move over to Colonial Behavioral Health. We're going to appoint Ms. Denise Kirschbaum, Ms. Erin Otis, and Mr. Roy Witham for terms that end on June 30th, 2025.
Economic
Economic
Development.
Development.
Historical Commission.
Historical, hang on, I got to move on over. Okay, Historical Commission. We're going to appoint Ms. Adrienne Carter, Mr. Alan Outlaw, and Ms. Rebecca Suradick, I guess, for terms that expire on June 30th, 2025. And then I've got Thomas Nelson Community College Board. Will appoint Ms. Tijuana Golson, effective immediately to expire on June 30th, 2025. And then finally, Williamsburg Regional Library, Tony Sturdivant, to effective August 1st, 2022, and expired on July 31st, 2026.
Okay, we have a motion. Mr. Stevens, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay. Do I have a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on July 12th
Motion
for
for
a
adjourn.
regular meeting?
Motion for adjournment.
Call the roll.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Sadler? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye. Meeting adjourned.